Welcome to the July 6, 2020 work session of the Gaston County Board of Education. I am Brent Moore, Crowders Mountain Township, and Chairman of the Board. And at this time, I would like to ask the other board members to introduce themselves.
Dot Cherry, at-large member.
Jeff Ramsey, at-large member.
Dot Guthrie, Gastonia Township.
Lee Dedman, Gastonia Township.
Justin Davis, South Point Township.
Kevin Collier, River Bend Township.
Steve Hall, Dallas Township.
Terry Usry, the Cherryville Township.
On behalf of the board, I would like to welcome everyone today to our work session this afternoon. I hope everyone had a good 4th of July weekend. Many of you still may be on vacation, so I appreciate you joining us for this meeting. Our next order of business is to adopt the agenda. You have a proposed agenda before you. Do I hear a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Mr. Ramsey?
Second.
Second, Mr. Hall. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, and it is unanimous. Our first order of business is to re-entry plan. This is an information item, and this is Dr. Booker.
Good afternoon, members of the board. We appreciate you joining us and allowing us to have this work session today. I would, as you look at your agenda, the first two items are the re-entry plan for information and Gaston blended for information. As Dr. Balknight and I were preparing our presentations, it made sense to combine the two rather than, because part of what I'll be covering would lead into the pieces of her presentation. So you'll see some transitions between Dr. Balknight and I as the presentation is going on. So item 3 and item 4 will be covered in this presentation. So I want to thank you for this opportunity, and if we could go to a share screen with Ms. Stevens. Over the past several board meetings, ever since we began this COVID odyssey in March, we have talked about what it would take to reopen our schools. We have been given information from various departments of the state and primarily from the governor's office. Today, we want to walk through what it will be like for reopening of schools in Gaston County. When you think about an overview of where we are, none of us have ever experienced anything like COVID-19. And we are in uncharted territory. We want to use this time to engage our stakeholders for input and feedback. And we know that the 2021 school year will be different than any school year we have ever had. As we start to begin this work session and talk about outcomes, I'd like to just step back for a moment and share some of the information that you all have been receiving, that I have received. We have parents that are sending us very heartfelt emails talking about their child and any physical difficulties their child may have, and they're asking questions like, will people have a mask? Can my child stay home until there's a vaccine? Can you help me provide an educational setting where I feel safe about my child? And then we have other letters that come that talk about within the last 2 weeks, the American Pediatric Association releasing a document that said children need to be in school, and talking about how structure and the things around school are so valuable. All of this talks about the value of public education in our community, and we have talked about that over the last several months about the value of that. So as we talk about that, just remember that we have varying opinions within our own community, within our own operational discussions that we have as a senior leadership team. But today, as in this work session, we want to make sure that we provide operational strategies and just talk about the guidance we receive from the Department of Health and Human Services, the State Board of Education, the Department of Public Instruction, but also recognizing the governor's orders supersede all of that. We'll talk about some of the priority and decision-making strategies that you will be discussing, but recognizing any discussion that we have talks about safety, safe buildings, safe classrooms, safe activities. And then we'll talk about our next steps as we move forward. This document shows as of June 30th, we had over 1,000 COVID cases diagnosed in Gaston County. Last Thursday, the health department held a special news briefing to talk about and to reinforce the need to be vigilant as we fight this COVID-19 epidemic. And so as part of that, we further delayed our athletic participation till July 20th to wait to what the governor will do on July 17th. We joined most of the major districts in North Carolina in making that call. It was one that we talked with our athletic directors, principals, but primarily working with the health department and getting their consultation. And so while I know there are folks that would like to see us out there with athletics, at this time we felt that was the most prudent decision. At the same time, the Charlotte Observer, the Durham Herald Sun, and the News and Observer commissioned the Elon University to conduct a poll. And there was a multitude of data that came out of that poll, but here you see when they were asked the question, should North Carolina K-12 schools reopen this fall? Recognizing fall is August 17th. That's the date that the General Assembly established we would return. You have done work and had your calendar committee review and adopted a revised calendar to meet the general statute order that you received to operate on August 17th. But when asked that question, you will see 34% said, I'm ready for full-time return. 38% said part-time return, and 29% said full-time remote. This data matches with what a lot of other districts have seen in any short polls they have done of their communities. So you see that the decisions that we face and that will be brought to you are complicated, and that a third of the folks are ready to choose any of the three options. And underlying in this, you'll hear folks talk about, well, it's hard for me to say what I would do till I know what your plan is. And we respond, well, it's hard for us to plan till we know what numbers we have to plan for. And so that chicken and the egg discussion keeps attention going as we work at that. But what we have tried to do is to take these two documents, and you have seen both of those. First was published, the Strong Schools of North Carolina Public Health Toolkit, and it laid out detailed from the state's perspective on how schools should operate. Then the Department of Public Instruction, working with a number of groups, and you were fortunate enough because of the size of our district to have people involved in some of these committees that were working on this, and they published the Lighting Our Way Forward, which is a living document that grows, and this weekend when I was working in it, it's up to a 140-page document with different guidance and adoption recommendations. So from that, there are three clear plans of action that the governor has outlined. Plan A will be the closest we would have to what school was like in February of 2020. All students would be back in school, in their buildings, operating. However, they would have to maintain minimal social distancing, face coverings recommended. They'd be screened before they entered the building. You would have more flexibility on social distancing, but still trying to minimize the movement within a building. Plan B is the one with moderate social distancing, but the key there is building occupancy at 50% or less and limited occupancy on school buses. And then Plan C is more closely aligned with what we had done in the spring, but I will tell you it'll be nothing like what we've done in the spring, because with proper planning and time to put in place more structure, we hope to be able to reach students on a more consistent basis going forward. But those three plans are what have been laid out that the governor will dictate which phase we are in when he directs schools. For your school system, as we have been meeting and talking, we continue to say we will provide a safe school environment for students and employees. That's got to be our number one thing. And that is what developing a reopening plan that's the best interest of our schools is going to be critical. And we want to make sure that what we do is quality, whether it be in person or remote. And that we want to try to keep people informed as timely as we can. Since we started this process back in March, we have held a weekly meeting with our principal leadership team to try and give them whatever information we can. And sometimes it's been frustrating on both ends of that discussion because they have questions that we wouldn't have an answer for. But we tried to be open to say, we have not been given any instruction on that at this time, so that we all were working from the same viewpoint and knew what everyone knew so that they could share it with their teaching faculty. So what's happening now? We have established work groups from a district leadership level, central office, principals, and a lot of these work groups are cross-functional to allow people to have input, but it also gets back down to last week one of our principals as a one-on-one was having a conversation about, I'm looking at option B, how would I do that in my school? Because it will come to the individuals at those 54 physical locations, as well as our 55th school, the virtual school, trying to say, how can we implement this and how can we work through it? But this collaboration is important for us as we move forward. And so through all that, we still have to remember that we have state guidelines that we'll follow, local guidelines with the governor weighing in on that. So as part of that remote learning plan requirement that we have, that must be in place regardless of which phase we're in. We instituted a parent survey 2 weeks ago, and as of this weekend, we have over 3,600 responses to that survey by our parents, and I thank them for that because it is a long survey, and we appreciate the information that they are giving to us, and that survey is still open for people to respond. And that really was getting information about our remote learning plan, and we're also gathering some information about how we would go forward on that. Last week, we also released a remote learning survey for our teachers and certified staff, and just last week, with the holiday, we already have 700 responses to that. So I want to thank them for their diligence. And I've gotten some great emails where people saying, well, it asked this, but I wanted to express this. And we encourage them to continue giving that feedback. So now is where we'll integrate part of the other presentation. And I want to ask Dr. Balknight to talk about what blended learning means in Gaston County and all the work that has already been going on prior to COVID-19 that has us in a position to respond to this crisis. Dr. Balknight?
Thank you, Dr. Booker, and thank you, Chairman Moore and the education members for allowing me to share with you an update on the work that Academic Services has done. So one of the things, as you'll see with this visual, is that Gaston County continues to identify and employ methods for learning for its students across all levels of the district through school choice, blended and virtual learning options. The district has partnered with a company called Modern Teacher. In fact, a few board meetings ago, you approved the continuation of that contract to help guide and support us as we work toward modernizing K-12 learning environments for our students with the purpose of creating a K-12 modern school district where student-centered, personalized learning options provide students with more choice in their learning pathway. This is the instructional model that defines the components of a modern learning environment. It includes a focus on a learner-centered environment, rigorous curriculum, responsive instruction, and blended assessment. When planning instruction, whether it's face-to-face, virtual, or blended, we want to ensure these 4 areas are always present. So this has been our plan over the last 5 years. However, as the superintendent spoke of earlier, we're moving faster than anticipated because of the pandemic and COVID-19. So we will continue to work through this. And he also talked about previously, and you'll see in our next slide, talked about previously, that one of the things is that our teachers were using whatever platforms were available to them. And with that, you saw many teachers using things like Seesaw and some of the other items that were Edgenuity, iExcel, Google Classroom, and Google Sites. That was emergency remote learning. One of the things that our teachers are working very hard on that they started last spring and will continue through the summer, and it's tough on all of us because we like to have a break away from instruction, but we're working and training teachers this summer so that we can be prepared for a planned blended learning environment. So as we transition to a planned learning environment, which I shared this slide with you previously, this is our slide on Gaston Blended, and it highlights all the things that our schools will need to do to prepare for planned blended learning as a district-wide rollout. So we have embedded this as a part of our instructional framework as we move forward. So when you highlight the learning management system, which we've talked about at previous board meetings, we've identified two, but it is important to have a learning management system as the Department of Public Instruction and our State Board of Education have strongly encouraged districts to go to that for several reasons. Number one, it's critical that we have consistency and equity across the district with our instructional expectations, that all children get a minimal level of expectations of what's being offered if they're taking the same subject, the same course. So students that are in Math 1 across the district should see similar things, but every teacher has their own. So the two learning management systems that we're using, Canvas and Schoology. Canvas is 612 and Schoology will be K5. And so those are the two that we're training our teachers on. So they may use other components, but consistently across the district, K-12, these are the two platforms that our families will use at home.
Dr. Botnight?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Guthrie and I sat in on a presentation last week with the makers of Schoology. And if I'm saying it wrong, Doc, please correct me, but
You're right.
I think our teachers and our parents are going to be thrilled when they see the benefits of Schoology. Now that I'm pronouncing it right, I was extremely impressed, and I was able to talk to a few teachers after I got off the presentation. And the first comment I heard from one of the teachers, you mean it interfaces with PowerSchool. That is exciting because that's going to take out several steps for me right there and enable me to be a lot more efficient with my time. So that was interesting and exciting news for me. But just the opportunities that Schoology offers in extension to classroom teaching was very exciting to me. So I'm gonna let you take that torch, Ms. Guthrie, and go along with it.
Well, I want to just add that I was extremely pleased with Dr. Jackson for arranging that opportunity for us to actually see the demonstration. And in addition to the equity that the children will get as far as learning and learning styles, there will be professional development for the teachers. And I like that too, because again, you talk about consistency, and that would be consistent, and teachers will have the opportunity to actually look at the program and see, maybe evaluate where the weaknesses are across the district as they look at student performance. I just think that what you have proposed and what you are going to do for the children here is just phenomenal, because you're not leaving out anything. The only thing that I would be concerned with, and I'm sure that that will be addressed, is the fact that the children, if we are remote, if we only go part-time, will they have the devices available to them so that they will be able to perform the way we expect them to in order to show the growth?
Yes, ma'am. And one of the things that the superintendent will talk about is our plan to support students with technology. In addition, we have already started our summer school, and lots of students that still are limited with their technology access, they have been given jump drives. And so all the information has been loaded onto the jump drive for them to use with their Chromebook. So we are, as Dr. Booker highlighted earlier, we are better prepared and planning for any of the possible options in the fall. So that means that we have several ways that we can provide instruction to students. Both of these platforms also allow for the children to interact with each other, for teachers to determine the duration of how long the student's been in activity, which would allow her to tweak the activity if the child is not able to stay engaged. There are videos that will be loaded into these platforms. So as a parent, when you're working at home with a child to review something, if you need to watch it 5 times, then you have that opportunity to do so. The beauty of this as well is that whether we're in plan A, B, or C, all of our things will be in this platform. So there won't be a shift to quickly make packets for families to pick up and trying to figure out, can we get it to students? Everyone will have the same information from the beginning of the school year to the end of the school year, and will continue to work on the platform, whether they're in the classroom or in a different environment based on COVID-19 and where we are with that.
We also, and I was amazed to hear that students have in the past maybe said that they've turned some work in that they were required to do, and parents didn't know whether or not that was true. But now parents will have the opportunity themselves to see whether or not a child has completed his or her assignments via this program.
Ma'am, that is correct. It certainly will engage and include the parents. We're also planning a parent university as well to train parents so they know
good.
the platform as well, and they can become very proficient in all the components. So as a parent, they are also able to support and stay engaged with their students.
Ms. Baltimore,
Yes, sir.
is this for virtual learning or in classroom? Or is it for both?
Mr. Hall, that is a great question. It is for all students. So whether they choose to participate in the virtual school or they go brick and mortar to school every day, all students will be in this platform so that families will have the same consistent support and instruction. However, when you come to face, there will be some direct instruction, but you will still submit your things into the platform. Teachers will put independent projects out to you, even if you're in the classroom. And so that's the beauty of training students on this platform, so that if something changes in October and we have a snow day, or a weather event, or we're sent home because of COVID-19, children will know how to work into in the platform. Parents will have been trained. And so we won't skip a beat with instruction, and families not trying to figure out, how do we do this? Or I don't have access to my resources. They will all be digital in this platform.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great questions. So we can't do this alone. Our instructional technology facilitators have been a critical piece of helping us provide training to teachers. And as I said, a lot of training will occur in July. That is not typical for us, and we certainly know that that's a hardship for teachers. However, we have to make sure that we have rigorous instruction that is consistent across the district that supports the needs of our students. We were not in school face-to-face and had emergency instruction for the last quarter, basically, of the school year. So we'll have to redo our pacing guides to bring those things over so the children will have a great review, and train our teachers. So those things are critical. This is something that you'll see K-12 that all of our teachers are going to be trained on. And again, I referenced Modern Teacher earlier. This is a visual of all the components of a successful blended learning environment. So all of our teachers, K-12, will be trained on this before school starts. Our elementary and middle school teachers have already started on this module, and our high school teachers are working on it now. All content areas are important, and they'll all be trained. And here you just see that the two have come together. Again, we've had a long-range plan to have the visual that includes the balance of learning center environment. But now we have to move faster to make that Gaston blended so that we can be prepared for our students to be successful in the fall for the school year 2021.
Dr. Baltnut, I have a question. The Teaching and Learning Conference is scheduled, the online Teaching and Learning Conference is scheduled for August, around the 5th or 1st or 5th. I don't know. I can't remember. But will the teachers, those teachers that have not been in the summer training, will they have the opportunity to have that training as part of the teaching and learning sessions?
There are several modules to being trained in Canvas or Schoology. The first is independent, and teachers can do it when they choose to this summer. The other is that they'll work in their professional learning group as a district. So if you're an art teacher, you'll work with other art teachers because they'll need to build their class. Every teacher can do it independently, but we think if they work together collaboratively with our timeline, they certainly can learn and grow together. We know that we'll have ongoing professional development throughout the year. We will offer sessions, Ms. Guthrie, at the Teaching and Learning Conference for those teachers that have been unavailable and have not been able to do it, but it will be a much shorter timeline for those teachers. So we're encouraging teachers to start on their training in July, unless it is not at all possible. Our keynote speaker this year for the Teaching and Learning Conference, even though it's virtual, is Dr. Sean Smith, who is the author of The Modern Teacher and used to be the former chief of schools of Chicago Public Schools years ago with 800,000 students. And he's written several books. He came to our administrators conference several years ago to present to principals about working in a blended environment. And so we're excited that we were already on that journey. So we feel that we are much more prepared than some others are with already moving in that direction with our students and teachers K-12.
You mentioned special area, you mentioned art. I went back and I looked at the program after the demonstration, and I did see that there was a component that would allow the special area folks to develop their curriculum as well. So it would be inclusive of the entire school. And I like that inclusivity there.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Booker and I have received lots of emails reaching out to us about our fine arts programs, our core programs, and we are committed to all disciplines and then being treated fairly, providing the training and the platform for them to still engage their students. Everything is critical to public education, so no one will be left out.
Thank you, Dr. Balknight. Members of the board, you can see that we were uniquely positioned to move forward with this. Perfect, no, but working hard to make this an opportunity to continue a forward movement in our educational offerings. What you have here is the focus areas. We have multiple areas of focus, but these are the critical ones to just talk about, where we are trying to focus as we communicate and keep people informed. Beginning with registration and enrollment, I want to make sure that everyone knows kindergarten registration is available and it is online. So you can do that. There are help desks to support that. So we appreciate folks registering for kindergarten because it gives us a good idea. We are behind the projections that we would have anticipated at this time, and we know there's a lot on people's plates, but if they could please register for kindergarten. Also, our student assignment office is open and assisting families. They will make appointments to work related to student assignment issues. So we are hoping to do that. And our virtual academy is open and ready for enrollment. As we think about the different offerings that we have, there are a lot of questions, and what we wanted to do here was let Dr. Balknight just walk you through the Gaston Virtual Academy. A lot of folks are trying to respond now to how do we do a virtual academy. Fortunately, with your support, 4 years ago, you began the planning process, and then 3 years ago actually opened the virtual academy, and you've seen growth as well as good academic performance in that, and we're going to open that to more broad enrollment in response to the crisis. So Dr. Balknight.
Yes, sir. And as Dr. Booker mentioned, on our next slide, you'll see that in 2017, we opened our virtual school with 26 students. And then we ended the school year in 2019 with grades 3 through 10 with 100 students. And so this fall, we maintained our 100 students in the program and look forward to an increased enrollment. We actually increased our enrollment 300% over those 3 years. And in fact, several districts have reached out to us to find out how has it worked, how are things going, and how can they replicate it. So we feel, as Dr. Booker mentioned, in great position to expand the program. This current school year, if you'll go back, this current school year, the school year 2020-21, we intend to change our enrollment to K-12. Everything in the virtual school is independent of any other school. They do have their own teachers that work in the virtual environment that are highly qualified Gaston County school teachers. And even as we've started this school with all the components that go into a school grade, the virtual school has a letter grade of C. In addition, they're already winning things like the spelling bee. They're winning competitions at robotics, Battle of the Books, and other things. So the students have been able to come together and really form a school ecosystem with their own friends within that environment, even though they work in a virtual platform. And we've got lots of great feedback. So at a glance, the class schedule, and this was the purpose of the virtual school when it was first created. Originally, it was created for a child that was trying out for the Olympics, or a child that was an equestrian that needed to have some flexibility in their schedule, or whatever the reasons were. And so that's why we weren't expecting to have 1,000 or 2,000 students in the virtual school. because of the flexibility and the specific needs. But as Dr. Booker referenced, that has now changed to meet the needs of a larger group of kids. So we will allow families to enroll in this non-traditional schedule that may work better in their home with their concerns about COVID-19 or just support for their students at home. And virtual learning is very personalized. So the students take an assessment, they work at their own pace, on their own pathway, and get face-to-face support if needed, and also virtual support from, again, highly qualified teachers within the district. The great thing about this in previous years and in the upcoming current year, it is 100% online. They do have times that they can optionally come in when appropriate. That may not be as often this current school year, but they can work independently online 100%. But they have just as much support if they're a child with an IEP or an EC student or a gifted student that needs some additional support as well, or a second language learner. They will get the same level of support as a child in a brick and mortar school, but they can work online from home. And again, the classes are taught by our highly qualified teachers, and they have as much engagement with the virtual platform or one-on-one tutoring sessions as needed. We monitor their success and bring them in as needed to provide support. Here you can see just some positive comments that we've received from parents over the years about how great the virtual academy has been to meet their specific needs. One parent said Gaston Virtual has been the best experience for my daughter and made a huge difference in her life. Just because sometimes students don't work in a traditional setting, Gaston County Virtual Academy is a great school option. My kids have enjoyed their first year. The last one that I'll share is I appreciate all the time and effort your staff has given us. With Gaston Virtual Academy, I was better able to see my son's learning progression and reflect on his past school behaviors. I would not have had this opportunity without you. And a lot of positive feedback from parents is children just perform better when they can work at their own pace. So for the first time, we'll provide all of our virtual students K-12, second grade through 12th grade with a device. Students in K-12 will receive the Calvert K-12 toolkit, and that's more aligned and appropriate for a younger learner. They will pick up a box that will be aligned with their instruction that they'll get with from their teacher, and they'll work with those things sort of project-based learning at home with their families. But we're very excited. That is a very popular tool across the nation, the Calvert K-12 toolkit, and we're very excited to add, number one, K2 to our virtual school, but also to be able to use this resource that has been proven across the country to be a great resource to interact with students and provide blended learning, but not too much screen time for the younger learner. So they will use all the platforms that I have listed on the screen, as well as all the other things that the entire district will use as well.
Dr. Balknight, I have a question in regards to virtual schools. I don't know whether you saw the audit by Annalise Soros, who audited the public education in the North Carolina virtual public schools. She, in her article last week, said that there were 8 courses that virtual academies were teaching that did not meet standards. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, ma'am. I'm familiar that they audited some schools and some districts to look at what they were using. We are building our own courses aligned to the state standards, so we are in line with what North Carolina requires. That's why I continue to say North Carolina highly qualified teachers that are employees of Gaston County Schools. So their resources are paged just like every other resource in our district. And also we're proud of the fact that our school, our virtual school, is a letter grade of C. That is a very hard thing to do when you have 100 students and some of those students are not being tested in all those areas. And we have students that are enrolled with, that are gifted, that have an IEP, that are English language learners. And so we meet all of their needs, and that school started out and continues to be a grade C, and we're hopeful to continue to raise that grade. But that is a huge accomplishment for the school. We're very excited and ask that families would consider, if they don't feel comfortable returning back to school, to apply for the virtual academy. Again, it was intended to be a smaller school, but we have prepared and are ready to grow it to scale to receive as many as 2,000 students if we need to in a virtual environment this fall. So if they'll simply reach out to the student assignment office or go online to apply, we will quickly process that to provide the information so their families can make plans. And that's our information. And here is our one visual of all the different components of the slides that I just walked through that will be available for families just to have as a reminder as they review the PowerPoint online.
from an enrollment standpoint, we are trying to offer all options that we can for our students and our community. When we think about the daily operations of schools, this is one of the challenging things to discuss. In option A, you will have the ability to fully have attendance of 100% of the students, but with some of the requirements on spacing, minimal distancing, for some of our schools that were already at capacity by previous standards, it will be a challenge to operate. Then if you look at in option B, where it's 50% capacity with social distancing, you'll have to look at implementing various styles. So all of those things will factor into anything that we would do in developing a schedule. And those schedules could be a blended model where a student would attend in person as well as doing remote learning on off days so that you can utilize the 50% capacity.
Dr. Booker,
Yes, ma'am.
let's just say for right now, the principals know what their enrollment would be. Have they made an effort just to look at the physical layout of the schools now, just to see whether or not they would be able to accommodate that the B section, the part-time return?
Yes, ma'am. That is an excellent question, Ms. Guthrie. We're at all various stages of that. One of the things that we tried to do as a district with our leadership was let's make sure we finish the academic year strong, that we get to June and have a great graduation experience, as well as finish all of the 11 through pre-K grades to the best that we could, and from that point we would move forward. So beginning in principal meetings, after that point we've had breakout sessions. We've also had some individual meetings with principals to talk about how they visualize this, but we were waiting for more direction to have an understanding before we invested a lot of energy in one option, knowing where we would come. With the governor having a July 1st deadline, that target seemed to be a good pace to be moving forward. With the announcement last week that we encourage to have as many students in the building as you can, and we'll be moving towards that and giving direction further. We do not have the luxury to wait any longer, and so schools have started to look at that and try and figure. I was with our head of auxiliary services earlier today talking about transportation, building occupancy, had a 15-minute meeting with our custodial lead as well as with our facilities maintenance lead to talk about what they were beginning to do. And they were asking questions that we still don't have the answer to, as far as how much of one personal protection equipment would we need versus another. So those discussions are going on, Ms. Guthrie, but I don't think anyone has a fully baked plan yet that would be, because we're still looking for some more clarification.
Right.
In just a moment, I'll talk about transportation, which you'll see the challenges and how it has been an evolving thing over the last 4 weeks since the original release of the document. So, but to the operations is, we've asked our principals to start looking at arrival and dismissal, how you would do those because of the social distancing requirements that will be placed in A or B. It will take changing the way you operate your building, looking at the different entry points that you may have to utilize, and how will you secure those entry points? How will you do temperature monitoring and doing that? So you are correct to hone in on the thing that is really driving us. We also, when you look into the finite words of the documents, it starts talking about restrooms and keeping social distance, and as part of that, there's still interpretations about playgrounds and the spacing of time between one group on a playground and another group. Discussions around playgrounds of, can the whole grade level go, or can it only be a class, and how much time to do that? When you talk about visits to other spaces like the media center and the libraries, and talking about how you can do music, art, and PE. I'm sure some of you received a very challenging email where someone had edicted, can you even have music and chorus and those things? And of course, we're committed to the arts in Gaston County, and we will be wanting to work with folks to provide the arts because we have such a rich cultural heritage in the arts. And with our, one of the top ranked career and technical education programs in the state. How will you offer that program in these various options A and B? But through it all, we know that safety remains important. And so you start thinking about, we have a couple of former principals serving as board members, think about trying to have a tornado drill and also be concerned about social distancing. I mean,
That's true. Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Booker.
Oh, my goodness.
Dr. Booker.
Yes, sir.
I wonder, has there been any conversation about changing the school times? Because getting these people in and out of our schools, doing temperature checks, doing all that, we might not have enough time in the school day to do that. Has there been any changing the school day?
Yes, sir. And when I get to the conclusion, talking about some of the options, you'll hear us talk about needing to explore that. Yes, sir.
Answer that.
So continuing on the daily operations, as a district, we've worked really hard to be open to visitors, having a great mentoring program, having reading buddies, and partnering with different entities. Well, now we'll have to limit visitors' access to our school campuses. We've got to look at all of our front office and lobby areas. You've all seen this adjustment in retail establishments and how it's going. Well, that will move into our public education. Probably 4 weeks ago, an experience was shared about visiting a doctor and how you had to stay outside in the car, and when you came in, the things. Well, that becomes a norm that people will expect to see as they try to enter our school buildings. So we'll have to think about those. And then how to configure classroom and other spaces to ensure social distancing. Our classrooms were built thinking you can put 30 to 32 students in our upper class buildings. And now you're being told that'll drop the potential attendance in those rooms to 12 to 14 students. How do you manage it? That's where I go back to, you may say that you're an A and you can bring everyone, but when you're respectful of social distancing and the requirements of that, it quickly shows you how that will be very laborious as you try to do it. For example, someone did a great analogy on a kindergarten classroom, and they put the 20 dots, which is the maximum enrollment in a kindergarten classroom, and said to spread that, it would now take 2 classrooms, because then you could put 12 in each classroom. Well, now you have 2 teaching spaces going on concurrently. That's a second adult that's needed, be it a teacher, be it a teacher assistant, to do that work. That's the kind of things that will have to be worked through as you go forward, thinking about how you operate schools, whether you're in A, B, and the impact that that has.
In high school, often you have 2 teachers sharing the same classroom too. That would need to be considered.
Yes, ma'am. And when you look at, when I get to laying out some of the potentials for Plan B, and you think about alternating days, how you work through some of your classes that only have 12 to 14 students and making sure you work. So that is a challenge. Also, how to accommodate students with special needs. We are a district that is rich with before school and after school programs that are both in the extracurricular avenue as well as in the remedial avenue. How would you offer those? But through what we read and you've seen folks talking about how many touch points can you eliminate. So you've got to start looking at doors in hallways. Can you have those doors open, but being respectful of a fire code and just making the chance for transmission as limited as possible. So these are just a few of the things that you have to think about in the daily operation of schools, and that's in the building. But this next area, bus transportation, is the most challenging one out there. Just trying to determine how to operate school buses. You, on any given day, transport between 15,000 and 16,000 of our 31,000 students. That's using buses of varying size and allowing you to have 72 passenger bus, a 60 passenger bus, and a 36 passenger bus. Those buses would now be able to carry 24, 20, or 12. So think about seeing a yellow bus going down the road that's meant to have 36 children on it, and there are 12 heads spread out on that bus, because what originally it was only 6 to 8 per bus. When you do the true 6-foot social distancing and measuring, they have now come back and said that if you have a mask on, you may put 1 child per seat, or if students are from the same family, they may ride within proximity of each other. So what we know, and this gets back to what Mr. Dedman was sharing, that our routes will take longer to complete. We were part of one of the focus groups that when the original guidance came out, they approached some of the districts and said, is reentry, and they wanted analysis. And we did an analysis that if the most restrictive requirement, your transportation cost would have at least doubled, if not tripled. And that's a significant number in your budget. And while it's funded by the state wouldn't have increased that budget, so that would look at the pressure of local dollars. So what we have done through some analysis, we believe that we can transport between 40 and 50% of that 15,000 volume. So follow that we would be doing half of what we normally do, so that gets back to how do we occupy our buildings and how do we distribute that. So to Mr. Dedman's point, we would have to unbalance our buildings. Currently, we have been saying our schools all open somewhere around 8 a.m. We're going to have to do a morning run for the elementary or the high school middle, and then do the other after that to balance that, because we wouldn't have the resources at that capacity of our buses to transport the children. And this is when we talk about, as I began this conversation and said, well, we don't know what we don't know. You know, how many bus riders will use alternate transportation? How many bus riders will choose to be in the virtual school and not to attend in physical? But all that still means we have these limits that our calculation, at best, we can approach 40 to 50% of that occupancy. So you see that limitation. But you can tell the old principal there was immediately catching that this will impact how we start schools. And when you think about our transportation now, as we ended and wound down in March, we still had 20 vacancies in our drivers. We don't know how many of our drivers will have sought alternative employment during this downturn, and we may not have those drivers. And so figuring out how to do those trips, we had a number of routes last year that an assistant principal or a principal drove because of a lack of drivers. So that will impact how we can do. And the COVID crisis has impacted driver's education and children being able to get it. Well, it's also impacted people getting their CDL license and the classes and how it's going on. So there's a backlog in that across the state. That's not a Gaston County unique. It's just part of what we're working through. So transportation remains the most significant. And then when you think about the need to do temperature checks, the state has recently come out with a form that you as a parent can validate. I've checked my student's temperature and it is regular, so they can get on the bus. But you've still got to figure out how will you monitor that and know that, so that when you pull up to a bus stop, everyone can get onto the bus. And of course, I've already mentioned the face coverings and the mask being necessary. So how will you administer that? So you're looking at potentially needing more bus monitors or folks, because we still want our drivers safe and we want our drivers able to operate that. And we have been working to be able to clean our buses. We're looking at, instead of having our buses staged as far throughout the county as they have been in the past, where they're based at schools, that we'd have to find more larger sites at high schools to bring them there so that we can do the cleaning and disinfecting that's needed. So all of those are studies that are ongoing related to transportation. But I will say that across the state, people are thinking about this as being the biggest challenge to what would be required to reopen our schools. So just recognize this is the one that we see having the most significant impact. We've been given some support through the COVID federal relief funds to purchase professional and personal protective equipment, some of the hand sanitizer, but the overall expense that it lays on thinking about how to operate transportation is an added expense beyond those. The next area of focus would be school nutrition. And there are a number of logistics related to school nutrition. You all saw, because you asked some great questions when we were doing our bid award for next year's coming cost, you saw some huge increases on a percentage basis in some of the support products for school nutrition. That's because we're anticipating that we're going to have to effectively box or prepare lunches, distribute them into classrooms to serve. At the same time, if we're doing some form of blended learning where students aren't all at our school, we're going to have to continue to run some form of a feeding program in the community because our students who aren't in school will still need a meal. So you see that will take a lot of logistical work. The cafeteria is a restricted area based on whether you're an A or B and how to operate it in the capacity. And in numerous cafeterias we have, they were already operating at a really 100% capacity where students had assigned seats so that they can maximize the use of that. And you know, Mr. Dedman, in designing a high school schedule for lunch, you're doing it somewhere between 23 and 27 minutes to make those class changes work. And that becomes a challenge when you start thinking about remotely feeding students and bringing it back. So that's going to be another challenge as we're working through this. Also, if we're able to use the cafeterias, it will then become how do you do the respective things related to floor marking, signage, and then having enough time between the feedings to do the cleaning that is required for the separation. Anyone who's been out to eat since restaurants were allowed to open again has seen the marked off tables and seen that when someone leaves, the cleaning that goes on prior to that. So we'll be under those same guidelines. Health and safety is one that goes on for pages in here. Obviously, you've heard me say repeatedly, you see it in the community, social distancing requirements will be of paramount things along with personal protective equipment and seeing folks with face coverings, gloves, thermometers, all of that. The state is purchasing on behalf of all school systems. We get 1 thermometer per 100 students. They are going to provide that as part of the base package. Don't have a delivery date on that yet. Everyone knows the challenges of getting a lot of these items that everybody needs, but they have secured that for us. And of course, each of, when Dr. Cohen does her briefing along with the governor, you hear her talk about the 3 W's and hand washing being so important as part of that. We've also got to work on all of the signage and trying to make sure we have it displayed properly, and they have given packets out about how to go about it. But back to Ms. Guthrie's question, when you start thinking about how to put that in place in the building and make it meet the regulations and still be respective of the other regulations we have in our buildings, it becomes a fine balancing act. The physical barriers and partitions, for each one you see a vendor developing, you see the challenges that it has to do, and how about workspace, think about teacher workrooms. Think about the large gathering spaces and keeping children apart, and how will you go about that? And from an administrative standpoint, how will you be able to station teachers and other administrative folks to work to help students do that? Most feel the older the student gets, the more you'll be able to monitor that, and they're more disciplined to doing that. But all kids are social and want part of that interaction. So we'll have to be considering that. And then when you go to thinking about daily temperature screenings and health checks, we have to establish rooms to place suspected exposures and deal with those. We've got to protect high-risk individuals, and recognizing this presentation focuses on our students and that, but we have our faculty and other support and personnel that could be high-risk individuals that we need to work on. I've already talked about how limiting our non-essential visitors, volunteers, and working with that. This isolation of students and employees who exhibit symptoms or temperatures becomes a critical thing, and then how to go about contacting parents and caregivers and working through that process. We've known how to do that for the typical outbreak or virus or just the normal time of when a bug was going through a school, but this has a different feel to it and a different requirement to it as we're going along. But you've read many things. We were already as a district working on mental and emotional health related to the well-being of our students. Now they haven't been in school for months and coming back. This will be something that we'll also have to be cognizant, but again, not only for the students, but for our employees. And this is going to take a wealth of training, and we're going to have 7 days when our employees come back prior to the 17th and students being back. So there's a lot going on related to that. Athletics and extracurricular activities has probably been the most current challenging. The North Carolina High School Athletic Association, as of June 15th, 16th, said you could begin some light activities with restricted numbers, and they put some conditions on that. But we were part of a large number of districts that said, well, we're going to wait till the governor's phasing movement. And of course, that didn't occur. And so, as I shared earlier, most large districts decided to delay that until July. Some have already delayed it till August 1st, but anticipating the governor may give clearance related to that. And as our numbers have gone up, it just continues to support that. Why risk an additional exposure at this time? So, but you see that workouts will have to be very orchestrated with very small numbers, and it involves temperature checks, face coverings, and then this part with the locker rooms and weight rooms being closed, how you can support that. And you say, well, they can go here. Well, most weight rooms in a physical, be it the YMCA or the traditional other vendors that have health clubs, have been closed through this. So it's a difficult situation, but it's one that we have to wait, and we do try to follow the guidance that's given to us by the High School Athletic Association. And then when you just think of our other extracurricular activities, it's like as soon as you see the fall sports starting, well, you have band camp that wants to start. You have folks that will start with different activities related to chorus and things, and then there's the academic extracurricular activities. All of those will have some limitation based on what phase we're in and what amount of folks we can have in one confined space. So that will be a challenge as we continue to do this. And then when you think about this, where it says keeping them in similar pairings with the same teacher and coach, how that works, it just makes it difficult when you think about mobility of the group being limited. So any team sport is very difficult to see. The individual sports, you start feeling that, but the team sports with a limit of 10 or less still causes some challenges when you think about a coach not being exposed. If he were to lead 4 consecutive groups of 9, then there's a potential exposure of those 36 athletes. So it makes it difficult. We put this one in here, mass gatherings, just because we need to know it has been defined for us in the documentation that a mass gathering is where it brings people at the same time in a single confined indoor or outdoor space, such as stadiums, auditoriums, multi-purpose rooms, gymnasiums, and making us aware of, as you all know, we have our facilities closed now to outside uses in conjunction with the governor saying we should be closed. So as we're moving forward with this for mass gatherings, we will just have to look at virtual options for all this, which means if you think about starting school back and open houses that we've had in the past, majority of our schools now have videos posted on their websites that are great information, walking you through the school, highlighting the things that they offer in their school. But you think of all the special ceremonies we missed in May, that how you can do those. A lot of it's going to end up being virtual. You all saw people doing virtual award ceremonies in elementary schools. But all that, it's hard to get a lot of momentum with your staff and parent meetings when you're having to do it virtual. So, but all that is where it is. And the last, with information and communication, we have been trying to use our standard forms of communication, be it Channel 21, our district and school websites, social media, and you all know you supported our partnership with the Gazette, where we've actually been running some full-page communications to let people know what is going on in our school. We have a dedicated page related to the coronavirus. And now the challenge there is it's been so long, it's getting very long and arduous. We're going to probably have to start a second page that's for the transition to do that. And then working with our schools to provide information to students and parents and on a regular basis. It's the challenge of anything. Communication always makes us hard to work, but we are trying to do, be it flyers, handouts. We've tried to be consistent across the district with things that are posted on our doors about hours or how we work. We've participated in a number of roundtable discussions with the health department, with the Belmont Abbey College, with several Rotaries, and we did one with the health department, just trying to say, here's our role and here's what we know at this time. We also are very appreciative of our business community who has come forward just last week. The chamber reached out saying, what information can we help share as you're coming back so that we can keep them informed of what is going on. So we have already sent invitations out to our Parent Advisory Council, Teacher Advisory Council, our local North Carolina Association of Educators chapter has put together a group that we'll be meeting with this week, sharing similar information that we're sharing now with the whole community, but also allowing them to give us feedback and to hear some of their concerns and reactions to some of the things that we're sharing today as we move forward to that July 20th, where you all will be adopting, here's what we're going to move forward with. Earlier, we talked about the survey for parents and employees related to our remote learning plan. We believe coming out of these meetings, we'll need to do some more, probably shorter surveys to get a feel for how people are reading what we've made available and what may be their potential choice. Always, this district relies on our principals to provide leadership in their communities and to share with their staff and work together. And I have just, for example, last 2 weeks ago in a meeting, several folks I see signing in that I knew were on vacation. They are that dedicated to knowing what is going on and trying to keep us moving forward. So again, that parent survey and our faculty survey are both still open the rest of this week, so feel free to give us that feedback because it facilitates where we are. So that's the focus areas that we have had. There's some key dates to remember. Your next board meeting is the July 20th, and that is where you will receive the plan for your endorsement of how we will look to reopen schools. We hope that by the 17th, the governor will have released information and given us some direction, so the plan will be more focused based on what he has given us, but we may have to bring to you all three plans depending on where we are at that time. And it's always important to remember, August 10th is when our calendar calls for teachers and certified staff to return, and then we greet on August 7th some form of our students for their return to that. So on August 17th is the date that we will have school, and I can just say I don't know what it'll look like, but I am sure it will look different than any first day of school we have had before. So to really talk about these three options and share just some things for people to think about. This is something that the CDC published at the end of June, and it said, okay, the lowest risk that we know of is for virtual classes, activities, and events. And then you see as it moves on the scale, small in-person class and activities, events with virtual options that are possible. And you can go out and read the CDC's guidelines, and they are very specific, and you see the challenges that operate as we move towards normal-sized in-person classes and activities. So as we think about that, then you put it in context with the three options that you know of. Here are just some of the highlights of what we've been talking about. If we were to do Plan A, the first barrier to overcome is today you still have that 24 student capacity on buses, and that's just a real barrier to operating. The social distancing that will be required in our buildings, when you have that more than 40% of your buildings and the age, they weren't designed with the broad, wide hallways that new schools or newer facilities have. So social distancing, meaning that whether or not you can truly have 100% occupancy will have its challenges. And then, of course, the health and safety will be how do you be prepared for face-to-face learning, but if you have a uptick in cases, an outbreak where people want to shift back to more conservative, how can you shift it to a blended model, keeping that always in the background? When you think about Plan B, and this is the one that most folks have spent the great amount of energy on, and that is, again, the transportation is going to stay as the change. But when you get back to the 50% occupancy, I want to just share some of the plans that have been published as other boards have been meeting in the end of June and putting things out. One district talked about pre-K through 6th grade meet 1 week, and then the next week the other half of them meet. So they're breaking it into that. and their 7th through 12th grades are fully remote every day. That's one of the things that they're considering because of the size of their buildings. Another talks about having a group A that comes on Monday and Tuesday. So that's 50% of their school would come on Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday's used as a cleaning day, a spacing day, and then Thursday and Friday, group B comes. And you roll through the school year with that. Again, this is operating in option B. Another district proposed that K3 would come in person every day of the week, and then as they went through their higher grades, there would be some form of blended learning going on. So they're looking at the challenge that way. I think many of you will have seen that the largest district in our state, Wake County, has proposed that they will operate a third, meaning, and again, this is driven by the challenges of transportation. They have 160,000 or more students, and so they're saying that Group A will come for 1 week and then be remote for 2 weeks. Group B would come in that next week, and then Group C. And so you're on a 3-week rotation where you're in school for 1 week and you're remote for 2 weeks. Charlotte-Mecklenburg, which is another large district, presented last Thursday a number of opportunities. They looked at the same as Wake County with week 1, 2, and 3. They also looked at an option where they used Monday through Thursdays and for high schools for 9th through 11th grade and staggered, but the Friday was held for seniors, and that would be the day that seniors were. But they rated a lot of these and put the challenges that were being. So they didn't do any adoption. This was just put out for discussion, much like you're doing today. Another district similar size to us has talked about that they would do pre-K, ESL, and exceptional children in person Monday through Friday, and they would have all high schools fully remote Monday through Friday, and they would use all their buildings to spread pre-K through 8th grade out throughout the community. So a middle schooler may actually be in a high school building so that they could meet the social distancing requirements that are associated with that. So that just shows you the various things. There is a district that is considering every student coming 1 day a week. So Group A would come on Tuesday, Group B would come on Wednesday, and Group C would come on Thursday, and the Mondays and Fridays be the remote learning days on each side of it. All these are in discussion, trying to do analysis, but I'll tell you the part that's driving it is related to transportation and how you can get students there. So that's some of the things that go on with B. C obviously is the remote learning only. So you suspend in-person instruction and you do it virtually for the entire district. It would mean we'd have to ramp up our summer feeding program. It would have some other name to it, but it would be operated that, and of course you wouldn't have transportation requirements for that. Again, I will say for parents, I know this is not the level of detail you want yet. We would love to be giving more, but we're still looking for further direction on which phase we would be in, and we'll be developing these plans further. Just hearing those few options that you hear other folks discussing, I hope that you can start to process what does it look like. And we understand that for working families, it is very difficult to have an up and down, in and out type of engagement with your child's education. So we see that, but recognizing we have the limitations of how to operate regarding to social distancing and the various requirements that are placed on us. So in conclusion, we hope that you hear all this talks about having a safe environment for our students and for our employees. And we will have to, in reopening, follow state recommendations. It will be different than it's been before, and it will present challenges and opportunities. This is a fluid situation, and you will see how we operate. You've seen already businesses having to come in and out of their opportunity to operate based on what's the impact on their employees. So I know this is a lengthy presentation. This is a infogram that we tried to put together that kind of just talks about all the underlying things that we know today and that we'll be talking about. So we'll be posting this, and it's just a summary for you all to see about what is going on. So I'll be glad to entertain questions.
I have a question, Dr. Booker. You hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I wonder if it'd be okay. I think the survey is a great idea, and I know that we have a lot completed. But I wonder if we could get Todd to make one of those snow calls to remind people to please fill it out, because the more information we get from parents, the better off we are. And to have also our principals maybe say something to their parents also, double whammy them about making sure they could fill the survey out. That would really be helpful. And the second thing is, we won't have to worry about water fountains and schools working this year, because we'll just tape them up.
You know, Mr. Denton, that is a great point. Water fountains is one that when you read the requirements, you see it's all over the place. One of the things that we have been doing is encouraging our principals and administrators to walk around running and keeping things flowing so that that water doesn't sit stale there. But how water fountains are used is one that is still open for discussion. They definitely don't want you over top of it. His question is, can you use it for filling bottles or not?
Thank you.
Dr. Booker, I have a question. Do you think the governor will give us flexibility county to county to implement Plan A, B, or C? Because, you know, some counties are having more virus outbreaks.
Mr. Ramsey, with all respect to the governor, as hard as my position is and all the things pulling at me, I can only imagine what he has pulling at him to try and make that. It has been the communication to date that he would be doing a statewide edict, and recognizing what all these documents say is we can, if they were to come out and say B, we can still do C. So we can do a more restrictive implementation. We just can't go to A if he has said B. So at this time, that's all that I know, and I don't know what he might do.
Dr. Booker?
Dr. Booker,
Go ahead, Steve.
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir, Mr. Hall.
If we were to do B, is this safe to say we don't have the resources?
When you say don't have the resources, what do you mean, sir?
Well, you're talking about, you know, buses. You know, we need 3 times the buses, twice the space for distancing and all that, you know.
Yes, sir. There have been some tongue-in-cheek folks that talked about how many, if you truly try to replace the physical buses to meet the requirements, how many buses it would be need. What we believe it will be that we'll have to run more routes with them, which will mean, as you all know, the majority of your drivers are on an hourly and less than full-time, so you would probably have the added expense of folks becoming full-time when you ran those routes.
I was referring to B, the B part, you know.
Well, B or A will be a
would have
challenge.
resources. Look, with all the cleaning, you'd have to have more custodians and on and on and on. So.
Yes, sir. That is an accurate assessment.
Thank you.
Dr. Booker, first of all, I want to thank you, and I respect what you and your staff have done as far as trying to put together the strategies, the thoughts, the programs, the opportunities in order to make our children safe. I truly, truly appreciate that. And I could actually feel the compassion that you were expressing. I want to also go back to health. I know the nurses, I know they will already have a plan, but you know, sometimes our little ones will get the sniffles and they will need to go to the health room. So we, you know, want to make sure that whatever preventions we can set up as far as keeping the little ones separated until their parents or guardians can pick them up, that would be good. But yes, you said something that really did register with me. I like the idea of actually making the other schools available for social distancing. I think that's just a marvelous idea. And I don't know, is that was that a combination between Plan B and Plan C, or was that just strictly one from another district that they were considering?
What another district has proposed is that their high schools would be totally remote learning.
Yes.
So their 9th through 12th, which would free up the space that they could have their K-8 operating on a 5-day closer to a traditional cycle, because it would give them the time, the space that was required to spread out.
When I know assessments will be made to actually look at maybe some learning loss that our children may have experienced, but I strongly believe with the learning management programs that we have in place, Canvas, Schoology, and of course the virtual program, we won't hit a brick wall at all. I feel that if we are Plan B or if we are strictly Plan C, the way you have sat and your staff managed to look for the very best educational platforms out there to make certain that our children's education will not be interrupted the way that it was before. And I appreciate that strong research and guidance. We won't lose if we have to convert to B or C. And we all must buy into this new learning management program. Our parents have been phenomenal in helping us as we try to make sure that, and I go back to graduation, parents appreciated the way that, of course it was different, but parents understood, and their children got to celebrate their graduation. Now we are looking at this from a different perspective. It's important now for us to begin with the end in mind, hoping that we will be able to not only offer the children of Gaston the very best education that we can possibly afford, but you're training the teachers to be cognizant of the importance of utilizing these online platforms, and the principals are diligently looking for ways to seek out the best positions for safety. We know that this is a challenge, and I greatly appreciate what I've heard this afternoon as we move forward. And just as we look at the different programs, this could be a win-win if we accept and do exactly what we need to do in order to move forward.
And Ms. Guthrie, you've done a great job of highlighting a couple things. When we talk about remote learning, and that's why Dr. Balknight shared about our virtual school and the success of the virtual school, that is different than what went on this past spring. This past spring was us trying to fill the gap and teachers doing outstanding work. And while I appreciate your knowledge of the learning management systems, I still know there's nothing better than one of our highly qualified teachers being able to engage face-to-face with the student. But what's great about using those tools is they can have that, and we have some of those neat, heartwarming stories from the spring, but a lot of that work was done on competency and with light grading. We will now be back in a traditional grading setup, and folks have got to take that with it, that it'll be back as if they were in class. It'll be for those who have been using the North Carolina Virtual Public School or are already using some of our distance learning classes or career and college promise courses. It'll be just like those, but it'll be across their whole spectrum. So that will be difficult to make sure is understood. But so you touched on another thing about our process and technology. I have Dr. Slutsky here, and I want to give him an opportunity to talk because we've got two really great things, I think, that are going. We know there is a digital divide. There is a whole section of our state government trying to work through how we manage the digital divide. And we're not going to solve having internet for all of our kids. That's going to be difficult. But what we can do is have availability of that. And our technology folks have already been working to move access points closer to the outside of the building so that you could access it from parking lots and things like that. But we're going to roll out, and we've been working with our principals related to this. You all know we distributed over 9,000 devices, and we've taken those devices back up and collected them. So Dr. Slutsky is going to just walk through what that means for next year and what I think is really a great step forward for this district that you all have been building in our budget each year to get to this point. So it's an exciting thing. Dr. Slutsky.
Thank you, Dr. Booker. Yes, so next year our plan is to distribute Chromebooks to all students starting in grades 2 through 12. We will be purchasing new Chromebooks for grades 2, 6, and 9. We have purchased 4,467 of them to date. We have those in hand. We are securing...
Whoa. Stop for a second and say how many have been delivered.
We have 4,467 delivered.
So I want to give a shout out. You know, we had the individual that stepped up and supported us. We were to get an order in, and then you're working with Mr. Hoskins on our budget. That means we have 4,000 devices that have now been received. So that's important.
Was that the beginning of his presentation?
We can't hear him at all.
We missed the first part of it.
Okay. Aaron, why don't you come sit and I'll move out of this seat so that you can do it. Yeah, what he was talking about is that coming into next year. So he'll recap it, but I want you to see that while you'll see all over this country delays in devices, but we have been able to get 4,000 devices that are in hand towards next year. So that's a great testament.
Hello, yes. So we plan to distribute Chromebooks to all students in starting in grades 2 through 12. To do this, we're going to purchase Chromebooks for all second graders, sixth graders, and ninth graders. And like Dr. Booker said, we have 4,467 of those in stock, in hand, ready to go to be distributed to the schools. And we are procuring the other 3,000 as we speak that will be then go to the schools. So to do this, doing this, we'll repeat this every year. So every year, second graders, sixth graders, ninth graders will get new Chromebooks. They'll keep it until they are in the last grade of that school. The current fleet will then be redistributed. So we took them back up from summer school, and we are going to redistribute those to all the other grade levels. So they will keep those again until they leave their final grade in that school.
So your ratio then is a 1-to-1? Is that pretty close to?
Yes, ma'am. It'll be a true 1-to-1 with each student getting their own Chromebook.
This year? It'll be 1-to-1 once you get the other 3,000?
We hope to have those before the school year starts. We can probably use some extra and the ones we've taken back up to give each student a Chromebook. But our goal is to get those other 3,000 in, so we start with second, sixth, and ninth with completely new Chromebooks, rather than giving them a used one and then having to redistribute when they do show up.
So when you get those 3,000 in, if they come this year, that'll give it 1-to-1 from 2 to 12 this year?
Yes.
You get those? Okay.
The 1-to-1 ratio. That's
yes.
good.
Be a 1-to-1
really
ratio from computers to kids in grades 2 and above.
That's great.
Now, we also plan to procure some other Chromebooks for the K1 students, and we'll do that on a quarterly cycle as well. So our goal is to get on a 3 to 4 year purchase cycle and just purchase exactly what we need to meet the students' needs.
So will the little ones will they have anything at all as far as a digital device, kindergarten and first grade? Will they have anything?
Yes, the K1 will have a Chromebook as well.
Okay, but just not one of the newer ones.
At first, we'll use what we have in our current fleet, but we also hope to purchase a quarter of the fleet for the K1.
That's all that matters, so they can utilize the program. Yes.
Okay. So for our For our K-1 students, we have projections next year will be around a little over 4,400 students. So we have touchscreen Chromebooks for them from some various purchases over the years and through some state funds through M-Class and those assessments. So we do have devices for them. We plan to buy a little over 1,000, so a quarter of that fleet each year to keep them on a current and refreshed devices as well.
And Aaron, this one-to-one, these kids will be able to take these home?
Yes, ma'am. We plan to send them home.
That's excellent.
So what if you have a family unit? You will still allow each person, each child in that family to have his or her own device?
Yes, ma'am. Each child, each student will get their own device. We found through the remote learning, emergency learning at the beginning that one device was not enough for the kids, for one household.
Great.
So each student will have one device.
Great.
Yes.
I'll turn it back over to Dr. Booker.
Thank you.
Dr. Booker.
I know, Mr. Collier, you've had a question. I've seen your hand up.
I just really had a comment earlier to follow Dot. I just want to commend you and staff for an incredible job working through all these options. I mean, I never even considered staggered bus, double bus trips. The sanitation is going to be required between double duty and buses and classrooms that are shared. It's just kind of staggering for over an hour listening to what all you guys have thought through. And none of this will become concrete for some time now. The only thing that as I think through this, we could open with one option and then very quickly transition to another. And then before the end of the first semester, transition back the other direction. So, I mean, that's something you're going to have to be prepared for as well, as transitioning from a B to a C or C back to a B or to an A, or any one of those things can be quite a challenge to transition from one to another as this thing changes come the fall.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Booker, Mr. Davis had a question.
It's been covered. I appreciate that, Brent. Thank you.
I do have one, Brent.
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Devin.
Dr. Booker, I hope that you will reinforce to our teachers how much we care about their well-being and their safety also.
Yes, sir. That was one of the reasons we reached out to Ms. Miller, who is chair of the NCAE, to talk about, we wanted a group to talk with them. And she has been very good about emailing concerns throughout since the end of school. And Mr. Clinton has attended in the past meetings, and he got on a Zoom call with me, with her leadership, to talk. So yes, sir. And it's not just the NCAE, it's all of our faculty and also all of our workers. When you think about what our school nutrition workers have been doing since March, and that we're approaching 1 million meals served in this community. So yes, sir.
And also, when you mentioned to Todd about sending a blast out, would you remind our principals to email their parents also and their teachers about doing that survey? Because I really think that's so important.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Davis.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Moore. Wanted to just make a comment. We've got about 174 people watching this meeting right now on YouTube, which I think is great, because that's a lot of parents and whatnot out there getting information about what's going on, and hopefully having some of the questions that they may have answered, although I'm very well aware that they're not getting many or most of the questions they have answered, because what folks want is to know what's going to happen when we open on August the 17th. But what I would encourage everyone to do is, if you're out there watching this, you have friends and family, these meetings will be out there for folks to come back and watch in. And so if you want information, if you want to help us to spread information in the community, encourage your friends to come back and watch the presentation that was just given, because it is very helpful to answer the questions that you may have, and also to let you know where we're headed and what that timeline is.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Ms. Sherry.
And on that note, everything that we've been talking about, I think these presentations shows all of us that we are very thoughtful on what we're going to do that's going to protect our staff, protect our children, educate our children in the best way that we can, whether it's going to be in the building, which is where we want to be. But if it's not doable, we can't and we won't do it. Protecting in every way, mentally, physically, is more important than anything. So when that time comes and we're able to make that last decision, we're going to do it, keeping our children and our staff. They're going to be the utmost importance to us. And we have the guidelines, and hopefully we'll be able to be back in the buildings. But if we're not, we will make it work to the best of our capabilities and give our students the best instruction and experience that we can possibly give them. That's what we need to leave our parents with, and our faculty and our staff with. And answer that phone. It's not mine.
Not mine.
Any more questions, comments? All right, we'll move right on. Thank you, Dr. Booker, Dr. Balknight, Dr. Susky. Our next item on the agenda is the summer construction. This is an action item, and Mr. Hoskins.
Good afternoon, Chairman Moore, Vice Chairman Collier, members of the board, Superintendent Booker. I do have 5 summer construction projects that we are bringing to you for action. 3 of these projects have not yet been bid. They will be bid next week. And what we are asking this board for is to give the superintendent and the chairman the authority to award the bids to the lowest responsive bidder. And then we will bring those back to this board on July 20th for ratification. The other 2 items have been bid, and we will be asking that you award those bids to the lowest bidder. So the first item is South Point High School paving project. This is one of the projects that will be bid next week. This is the front parking lot and the 2 adjoining areas to South Point Road on the north side of the property and the south part of the property. This parking lot has been repaired a number of times and continues to have holes and cracks and needs to be continuously repaired. The second project, again, it will be bid next week, is Mount Holly Middle School. And this is the front parking lot. It's the large parking lot just to the left of the main part of the building. Again, the same situation. This parking lot has continued to be repaired and potholes repaired, and those holes continue to come back. And then the final project that is not yet bid yet is the Belmont Central and Primary Schools school bus lot. This has been a design issue ever since the schools opened. It's difficult for our bus drivers to maneuver around parked buses when they're letting out kids without going over the curb or possibly, off the concrete or pavement. And so we're going to expand the asphalt so that it'll give the bus drivers a little more room to work and make that loop safer for the bus drivers and the kids. The fourth item is the South Point High School painting project. This is interior and exterior. We've done similar projects for Bessemer City High School, Chavis Middle School. We're currently doing Holbrook Middle School, Woodhill Elementary, and Sherwood Elementary. And if you've seen any of those schools in a before and after, the painting makes a tremendous difference. This school has not been painted in 15 years. So this was bid. The lowest responsive bidder is Peterson Painting, and the bid was $112,149. And then finally is the Ashbrook High School, again, interior, exterior painting. This was bid out, and Peterson Painting was the lowest bidder at $195,084. Mr. Chairman, we'll ask for approval for those 5 projects, and the 3 projects that have not yet been bid, we will bring back to the board for ratification at the next board meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the request by Mr. Hoskins.
Okay. Second, Mr. Ramsey. At this time, I'm going to have our board clerk. She will take the vote. Do we have any questions?
I do, Mr. Moore. I would like to clarify that when Mr. Hoskins was talking about item C, it is Bessemer City Central and Primary School
Thank you.
parking that he's doing that for.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so I'll call for a vote for the summer construction projects. Chairman Moore, I'm sorry, Vice Chairman Collier,
Yes.
Lee Dedman,
Yes.
Justin Davis,
Yes.
Terry Ushery,
Yes, ma'am.
Steve Hall,
Yes.
Dot Guthrie,
Yes.
and Dot Cherry.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
All right. Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is Blackboard renewal. This is an action item, and this is Mr. Todd Higgins.
Good afternoon, Chairman Moore, Vice Chairman Collier, and members of the board, and Superintendent Booker. This afternoon, I would like to present to you the Blackboard renewal for the 2020-2021 academic year. Last year, the board approved a contract with Blackboard Incorporated to provide the district website and the 55 school website, our mobile app, and the Parent Link communication system that gives the communications department, as well as our 55 schools, the ability to call, email, and text our various audiences and post messages to the mobile app and social media. With the approval of the initial contract last year, we have the option for an annual renewal, and that is what we are presenting to you today. The annual renewal at a total cost for all of the services mentioned just a moment ago is $171,098.19. Without question, the Blackboard renewal is essential to providing effective communication for Gaston County schools. Last year alone, we had more than 4.8 million visits to the Gaston County Schools homepage. We have more than 22,500 downloads of our mobile app, and the Parent Link system makes it possible to call more than 70,000 phone numbers in just a matter of minutes. These figures here, this information gives you a quick glimpse of how important the Blackboard services are to the district and also to our schools. The recommendation from staff is for the Board of Education to approve the Blackboard renewal for the 2020-2021 academic year. And those are my comments, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have any questions? All right. Need a motion.
I motion.
Ms. Guthrie?
I motion that we approve the recommendation to renew the Blackboard renewal contract
Thank you,
for
Mr.
next year.
Second, Mr. Hall. And at this time, I'll hand it over to our board clerk, and she can take the vote.
All right, I'll call the board for Blackboard renewal. Vice Chairman Kevin Collier,
Yes.
Lee Dedman,
Yes.
Justin Davis,
Yes.
Terry Ushery,
Yes, ma'am.
Steve Hall. No, I'm sorry. You seconded.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Jeff Ramsey
Yes.
and Dot Cherry.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. And our next item on the agenda is board policy update. This is the information item. And I'll
Yes,
hand it over
sir.
to-
Mr. Chair, members of the board, you have a lengthy number of policies, the majority of which are just being adjusted and to reflect legislation or other items that have caused the need to change those policies. And you all, through the School Boards Association, work with their legal team and Ms. McGraw, our legal team, to implement those. You do have 2 new policies that are there that both address existing laws, but it's just clarifying. One is to give us some clarification about these remote meetings, and then another one is about how information is handled. So I encourage you to look at those. But all of these policies are now, after you receiving them, will be posted online for comment for people to review, and then we'll bring them forward to you, as is customary, on the 20th meeting for you to approve those policies. So that would be our information, sir.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Booker. Next item on our agenda brings us to a time in our meeting. Oh, did you have something, Mr. Devin? I'm sorry.
I wanted to ask Dr. Booker one question before he gives his comments. We close. Dr. Booker, excuse me. Are we involving some students in discussions that you're having with our leadership teams, or are you relying on your student advisory board?
We have had some of our principals have had various interactions, but we have not had any formal communication with it. In my student advisory board, typically the majority are graduates and then rising juniors, so we have not reached out to any of the student input yet, Mr. Devin.
I would suggest maybe even for the juniors you had on your student advisory next year, maybe to have a quick meeting with them just to make sure we get some student input, because sometimes our students have very, very good ideas. A lot of times they do. So if
Yes,
you do
sir.
that,
Great point.
Thank you, Mr. Devin. That brings us to the time in the meeting to hear from our superintendent, Dr. Booker.
Thank you. And you all have heard way too much from me already today. I would like to just thank you and also thank our community. Yeah, I want to just go back and kind of summarize some of the things. One, let's remember, no decision has been made. We're all discussing and trying to talk through this. But what you see across our state as people are running numbers, be it on A or B, is the movement of students and meeting their transportation requirements as well as occupancy requirements becomes a challenge. Also, you see that there's a tension on how you alternate. If you decide that you're going to do some form of alternating, be it 2 days a week, 1 week, 3 weeks, any of those are an inconvenience and a challenge. And it's a challenge as well for our faculty and how to manage that. And so looking at those, it is a situation where all are trying to do the best they can to analyze it. And as the survey statewide showed, you've got a third roughly that look to each of the options as being viable for them. So we will continue to work and try and do the best that we can to prepare and bring a plan to you on the 20th that meets what the governor has required, as well as trying to provide the best education for the students of Gaston County. Mr. Chairman, we had a closed session request there, but the majority of it was just to discuss contract renewals, and most of these folks are receiving 4-year contracts, so you know them all. And if you're okay, I would just do those 2 items for the board so that we can do the paperwork necessary to renew these contracts. And then thus we wouldn't have to go into a closed session.
Okay.
For just personnel only?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to go into closed session under
No,
North
sir, we
Carolina.
we don't need to go
We
into
don't have to
closed.
do that?
You're okay.
No, everybody good with him? Just give his recommendation without going to closed session.
yes.
Okay. Yes, sir, Mr. Booker.
Thank you.
Yes, I did not hear. I'm going in and out here.
I'm sorry, Mr. Collier. What I was saying, the majority of the closed session requirement would be just to go over what I can read out here. And because these are all folks that have been employed by us and it's a renewal, it's just one of the requirements that I can't extend a contract without your approval. So I'm going to read a lengthy list of assistant principals who have all served in our district for at least 2 years, and they'll now be receiving 4-year contracts. Josh Bromley, Casey Bryson Evans, Laura Clark, Chris Gardner, Ryan Hatley, James Hilburn, Elizabeth Leonard, Jewel Maltsby, Amy Tollison, Kimberly Reese, Amber Tuttle, Joshua White, Shelby Page Willis, and those are all assistant principals that I recommend we award 4-year contracts to.
You need a motion?
Yes.
Ma'am.
I make a motion that we accept that.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Devin. All right. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Great. Thank you all for raising the hands. I could see those hands. So, Ms. Lawata, that was unanimous. Additionally, we have 3 principal contracts that need to be renewed. Megan Lefevers, Jessica Mellon, and Torben Ross. And I recommend all 3 of those for 4-year principal contracts.
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman,
Chairman, make a motion that we approve those 4-year contracts.
Mr. Second, Ms. Cherry. All in favor?
Aye.
So what you thank you all for that support. That is all of our existing leadership. We do have several vacancies in our assistant principal positions, and Mr. Clinton has been leading 4 different schools through an interview process to facilitate filling those positions. So we will target to have them for July 20th meeting to fill those positions. Mr. Clinton, have I forgotten any other items?
I have a question, Dr. Booker.
Yes,
What
ma'am.
about the principal at H Beam? Did he begin today or did he start last week?
They transitioned in the previous week before Dr. Irby left. They were able to spend some quality time together.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. We did. That's a great thing that I failed to mention in my comments. We did have an orientation for the 2 new principals last week where they met with Dr. Balknight, Ms. McGraw, Mr. Hoskins, and myself just to talk about the overall expectations.
Gotcha.
So, Mr. Chair, that is all the business that we have for you today.
All right, thank you. And I also want to say thank you to Ms. Stevens. I know she spent a lot of time with us together. I was having problems earlier, and we got taken care of with the. She's done a great job with PowerPoint and keeping us all on the screen at the same time. So that's a pretty difficult task sometimes. But thank you for your time and attention. We look forward to our next regular board meeting, which is currently scheduled for July the 20th. We do have 2 birthdays. Mr. Hall's birthday was on the 4th. Happy birthday, Mr. Hall. And Mr. Ramsey's is coming up on the 8th. So,
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
55.
And next week,
We'll send you a virtual cake.
Yeah. So, at this time, I need a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Devin.
to make a motion that we adjourn.
All right.
Second.
Second, Ms. Cherry. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned.
Have a good evening.